The classroom fell silent as the towering figure entered through the doorway, ducking to avoid hitting its crystalline head on the frame. Oscar sat in the back row, his worn notebook open to a page filled with scribbled equations and crossed-out calculations. He barely looked up from his work, even as his classmates gasped and whispered among themselves. Arya, sitting 2 seats ahead, turned around with wide eyes. "Oscar, do you see this?" She hissed, but Oscar only grunted in response, his pencil scratching furiously across the paper. The alien being from the Centauri. Prime Delegation stood nearly 8 feet tall, its translucent skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythmic waves. Dr. Zeleth, as the principal had introduced it, was one of the most renowned quantum physicists in the known galaxy. The creature's 3 eyes blinked in sequence as it surveyed the room full of human teenagers. "I am honored to address your species, youth," Zelethon began, its voice emanating from a translation device that hung around its neck like a pendant. "Today, I shall demonstrate the fundamental principles that govern faster-than-light travel, the very foundation upon which the Interstellar Coalition was built." The holographic projector on the teacher's desk hummed to life, filling the air above it with glowing symbols and mathematical formulas that twisted and rotated in 3-dimensional space. Arya leaned forward, captivated, while most of the other students simply stared in confused amazement. Zelethon gestured with its elongated fingers, and a particular equation expanded, dominating the holographic display. "This, young ones, is the Zelethon constant named after myself, naturally, which describes the relationship between quantum entanglement fields and space-time compression. It has been the cornerstone of interstellar navigation for 3,000 of your Earth years." Oscar's pencil stopped moving. He squinted at the floating equation, tilted his head, then resumed writing with even more intensity than before. For 45 minutes, the alien scientist lectured, weaving together concepts of quantum mechanics, relativistic physics, and mathematical frameworks that made even Ms. Peterson, their physics teacher, look pale and overwhelmed. The other students had long since given up trying to follow along, but Arya took diligent notes, her hand cramping from the effort. When Zelethon finally concluded its presentation, it clasped its hands together in what the delegation briefing had described as a gesture of intellectual satisfaction. "Are there any questions from you? Primitive, pardon me, from you developing minds?" Several hands shot up with basic questions about alien technology and space travel. Zelethon answered each with barely concealed condescension, its bioluminescent patterns flickering in what might have been amusement. Then Oscar raised his hand. Arya noticed immediately and felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew that look on his face, the same expression he wore when he challenged their calculus teacher last month and turned out to be right about an error in the textbook. "Yes, young human in the posterior seating arrangement," Salathan acknowledged. Oscar stood up, his voice steady despite every eye in the room turning toward him. "Your equation's wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet itself. Arya closed her eyes and sank lower in her seat. Zelethon's 3 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. Then its translator emitted a sound that could only be described as laughter, melodic, tinkling noise like wind chimes in a hurricane. Several students joined in nervously. "How delightful!" Zelethon exclaimed. "The confidence of youth is truly universal. Child, this equation has been verified by the greatest minds across 47 star systems. It has been tested in 17,000 documented faster-than-light journeys, It is mathematically immutable. It's still wrong, Oscar said, opening his notebook and holding it up. You're missing a variable in the third term. The quantum entanglement decay rate isn't constant, it's dependent on local gravitational variance. Without accounting for that, your equation only works in relatively flat space-time, which is why he flipped a page. Your ships can't enter or exit FTL within strong gravitational wells. You have to do it far from stars and planets. The alien's luminescent patterns stuttered, flickering erratically. Its translator fell silent for a long moment. That is a known operational limitation, Zelathon said slowly. Its tone shifted from amusement to something harder to read. But it is not due to an error in the fundamental mathematics. It is, though, Oscar insisted, walking toward the front of the class. Arya wanted to pull him back, to save him from the embarrassment that surely awaited, but she couldn't move. Look, if you add this correction factor here, he pointed to his notebook. The equation describes exactly why that limitation exists. And more than that, if you restructure the field generation sequence, you could theoretically compensate for it. Zelathon moved closer, its great height casting a shadow over the teenager. The alien's eyes focused with unsettling intensity on Oscar's scribbled notes. One elongated finger reached out, and for a heartbeat, Arya thought the creature might harm him. Instead, Zelathon gently took the notebook. The classroom watched in breathless anticipation as the alien scientists studied Oscar's work. Its bioluminescent patterns accelerated, pulsing faster and faster, cycling through colors that hadn't appeared during the entire lecture. This is, Zelathon's voice trailed off. It looked up at the holographic display, waved a hand to modify the floating equation, incorporating Oscar's correction. The new formula hung in the air, elegant and complete. By the ancients, the alien whispered, its translator barely audible. 3,000 years. 3,000 years, and a child sees what we could not. Miss Peterson found her voice first. Does that mean Oscar is correct? Zelathon's eyes remained fixed on the equation, then slowly moved to Oscar. Not only correct. If this holds under rigorous testing and my preliminary analysis suggests it will, this young human has just solved the single greatest limitation in interstellar travel technology. The alien's patterns shifted to a deep, reverent blue. What is your name, child? Oscar, he said quietly, suddenly seeming to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. Oscar Chen. Oscar Chen, Zelathon repeated, as if committing it to permanent memory. I came to your world believing I would inspire primitive minds with superior knowledge. Instead, I have been humbled. The alien performed what the briefing packet had described as a gesture of profound respect, lowering itself until its eyes were level with Oscar's. Would you be willing to work with me to develop this theory further? Arya watched her friend nod, still clutching his pencil like a lifeline. She felt a strange mixture of pride and disbelief wash over her. Of course Oscar had corrected an alien's math. Of course he had. That was just who he was, the quiet kid in the back, who saw patterns and problems that no one else could see. As Ilathen began an animated discussion with Oscar about quantum field dynamics, calling up new holographic displays and modifying equations in real time, the rest of the class slowly emerged from their shock. Phones were already emerging from pockets, messages being sent to parents and friends about the impossible thing they'd just witnessed. But Arya simply sat and watched Oscar. Brilliant Oscar as he stood beside an 8-foot alien scientist and rewrote the rules of interstellar physics on a Tuesday afternoon, using nothing but a worn notebook and a stubborn insistence on getting the math right. The universe, she realized, had just gotten a little bit smaller and infinitely more interesting.